Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Learning Webinar. My name is Chantal, and I'm going to be your host today as we discuss details. We're going to show you how you can cut and create your own details from your model, how to save them so that you can have them for future projects, and also how you can find other details out on the internet and bring them in and use them as well. Following the presentation, we're going to open up the chat panel so you can type in any questions that you might have about details. So during the presentation, don't hesitate to type up your questions, and once we're finished the more formal part of the presentation, we'll get to your individual questions. So let's get started. As you can see on my screen, I've got a very simple model drawn, but it'll be the good basis for some details that we're going to create from this model. So in the model itself, I have a foundation plan drawn with some footings, some concrete walls, and there's a staircase. And then on the ground floor location, we have some structural framing going on and a hole cut in that floor. So what we ultimately want to be able to do is cut some sections through the model and then drop some details on certain portions of that section that we're creating. So to start off, I'm going to create a series of sections through the model. I'm going to go down to the bottom of my screen to the Sections tool, and I'm going to choose Create a New Section. With this tool, it wants to know where I'm going to be cutting through the model. So I'm drawing a line to show that section cut. So I'm going to move my cursor outside my model, left-click once here, and you can see once I left-clicked, a line attaches itself to my cursor. I'm not holding down my left mouse button and dragging. It's simply a left click, move the cursor to the other side, and when I get to the other side, I'm going to left click again. When you're using the section tool, the next point that you have to decide is which way am I looking? So now I'm just moving my cursor either up or down to show it the section view. So I'm going to pull up, and you'll notice when I'm pulling up, there's a little box that's also attached to my cursor with those dashed lines. That's the depth of your section. So if my cursor was right here, I wouldn't be able to see that end wall. The section would cut itself before that happened, and I wouldn't be able to see past it. So I'm going to pull right out and past so I can see that very back wall as well. And then when I have that view box and that depth indicated, I simply left click. And that immediately creates a section through my model, and I can see it on my screen. You'll notice on the right-hand side of my screen where we normally see the catalog. Now in that catalog area of my screen, I see section properties, and there's a name for the section. It's called section 1. If I want to, I can give it another name that will remind me where I cut the section. So I can change that name to cut, and I'm just going to go over there, cut through stair. Okay, and you can see the mark text. The actual section markers are going to be put on as A1. So this is my A1 section. If I wanted that to be any different letters or numbers, this is where I can also change that. I'm happy with all of that. I'm going to return back to a 2D view. Now I'm going to go back and cut another section the opposite way. So again, I go down to my section tool, and you'll notice that not only can I create a new section, it's also showing me the last section that I created, cut through stair. And I'm going to create a new section, and again, draw the line that indicates where I'm cutting through. So I'm going to left click above my model, move my cursor down, left click below the model. The section markers appear, and I'm going to pull all the way through. Remember, that's depth. That's what that box is indicating. How far back in your model can you see? So I'm going to make sure I'm way clear of my outside wall so I get to see it as well. And I left click. Now I can see the section cut through the model in this orientation. And I'm going to say, change my section 1 name to be opposite of stair, or I could say perpendicular of stair, however I'm going to remember it. This is just so when I'm looking at that list of sections, if I'm cutting multiple sections, so I can remember which section is which, and I don't have to keep rifling through and looking for them. And when I go to insert this ultimately on a worksheet, I can remember which one is which. So this is opposite of stair. I'm happy with all of the different selections. I'll return it back to a 2D view. So I can see my section markers being cut through. Now I want to be able to insert these sections onto a sheet and pull details from them. So I'm going to click on my One Floor Plan tab, which is my very first worksheet, and I'm going to just put all of the details onto this sheet for today's class. To bring in the sections that I cut, I'm going to create a smart view. So I'm going to define the smart view of those two sections. When I'm in the Insert View dialog box, after choosing Define Smart View, I'm going to go to the very last tab at the top, which is my section views. It automatically will put it into the view that's looking at my sections. I'm just going to zoom out here a little bit so we can see the entire section. What I see in this preview dialog box is exactly what's going to be inserted onto my sheet. So I can see the cut through the stair. I can see everything about it. I'm going to bring this in as it is. All I have to do at this point is hit Insert. A copy of it attaches to my cursor, and I insert it onto the sheet. I'm going to repeat that process for our other detail as well. Define the smart view, go back to our sections. This time I'm going to say opposite of stair, zoom out. If I want to turn the visibility of anything off, I can always come into my View Filter dialog box. So in here, if I see something that I want off, like the terrain, I can turn that visibility off. We could see that line in the previous section coming through, and that was our terrain line. So I'm going to remove it for this one. The other thing that I might want to do is make sure in that view filter that I have everything turned on. So I'm going to unlock everything so that I can turn on my framing as well. I want to say display all eyes open, click OK, so I can see any associated wall framing, floor framing, ceiling framing, roof framing all on at the same time. And again, what you see is exactly what's going to insert. So I want to make sure that I'm not cutting through any of my section. You can see here that it's running past the view window. It's going to actually insert exactly like that. So I want to zoom out so I can see everything, and I can pan so I can move it onto my sheet. Zooming out and zooming in doesn't affect the scale. What's going to adjust your scale on any of the inserted views are the settings that you have here on the left-hand side. So when I insert this section, it's going to go in at 1/4 inch equals a foot. No amount of zooming in or out in the preview is going to affect that. But if you are zoomed in and you can only see a portion of the view, that's all that's going to insert. What you see in this preview is exactly what's going to be inserted. So make sure you zoom out enough or in for what you want the view to show. I have everything that I want to show. I'm going to hit the Insert button, and a copy of that detail attaches itself to my cursor, and it's inserted. When you insert views like this, if there's a point where you've realized that you've made some changes to the model itself and you want to update them, or two, you want to turn on and off the visibility of different types of elements, you can always select the inserted smart views and change them. For example, I'm going to select this very first one that we inserted, and I'm going to, first of all, on the right-hand side, after I've selected it, I can see its object properties, and on that right-hand side, I can see redefine the settings. So I'm going to choose redefine. That brings me back into that Smart View dialog box, and it's in here that I can make any kind of adjustments. So if I did want to go back in and turn off the terrain, or come in and turn on all of the framing as well by hitting Display All, I can make that adjustment and zoom out. So again, I can see absolutely everything that's going to be coming in. So going back through, make sure I've got everything, and cutting that section. Once I have all of that updated on my screen, I simply hit Update, and the view is updated on my screen as well. Okay, so just a quick way of being able to update the views. Now that I have those views in, I can use them as an overall detail. So if I wanted an entire wall section or this section, I can add details to them. But when creating a detail, you probably want to take a portion of any of these two inserted views and use them for your detail. As an example, I might be looking at this detail, this section that I cut over here, and maybe I want to do a footing floor slab detail, or maybe I want to do a stair detail, or maybe a floor framing detail. I'll be able to clip any one of those portions to create those details. I want to blow up, first of all, I'm just going to come to the draw option at the top, and under draw, I'm going to draw a circle. And with the circle, I'm going to go to the center and radius, and I'm just going to draw a circle around this portion. That's going to mark my first detail that I'm going to draw, and I'm going to blow up that portion. Another detail that I might want to create is this portion of the framing. So I'm going to repeat that last command of my circle and draw a detail maybe around here as well. So these two areas where I'm going to define new details. To do that, the easiest way is to go back to the Insert tab, go back to Define a Smart View, go back to my section option where I was cutting through the stair, make sure that I have the visibility of everything turned on, just like I did when I previously inserted that view, display all, but turn off that terrain. Click OK so it's all updated. And I'm just going to zoom out, and I'm going to very strategically zoom in on just this footing portion right here. And I'm going to shove it over so I've got just that kind of detail showing. Again, remember, what you see is what you get. So right now, I have a view on my screen in this preview area of just the footing, the concrete floor slab, and the stem wall coming up. That's all I want for this detail. I'm going to change the scale over here. I'm going to blow up this scale to 1/2 inch equals a foot. If there's anything else that I want to turn on, if there's anything else that I've associated with any of this, I can turn those options on as well. So if I wanted to show the datum lines, you can see the datum lines are also showed there on the side under datum lines. I can change those options. Or if I had hatch patterns associated to any of these views, I can turn on that hatch pattern view or leave it like this as a hidden line. Depends on how you want to insert them. I'm liking that it's 1/2 inch equals a foot. I like what it's drawn so far. I hit insert. A copy of that blown up detail attaches itself to my cursor, and I'm going to insert it down right beside where I've drawn that little bubble around that area that I wanted to detail. I'm going to zoom in on that little detail. Now that it's an inserted view, I'm going to left click to select it. And just like with the section view that I had first inserted, you'll notice over to the side that it has object properties as well. I can redefine the settings like I've done before. I can update the contents if something has changed in the model. Or you'll also notice that I have the opportunity to redefine the definition and edit the definition of this block. When I do this, it takes me inside the lines that it's created for this detail, and they become individual lines. With this, if there's any extra lines, like this extra one here shows the footing going through the entire model, but for our detail, I don't want that to show, so I'm going to delete it out. And this line right here, again, showing the extra line of the footing because it's running through the entire building, I'm going to delete it out. The lines that cap off the top of our footing and our stem wall that it's drawn to show where I stopped the actual detail, I'm going to remove those as well. So I get a more simplistic view. Once I'm done doing that and editing all the little pieces that I have here, I hit escape. If I select that again, and I, for whatever reason, hit redefine or update, that means that all of that work that I've just done about editing the definition is going to be erased. So make sure when you insert a detail like this, that you're at the point where you're not going to redefine or change any of the settings for it. Because updating this smart view, this smart view of just this portion, this little detail, will wipe away any work that you've done when you went through and hit edit the definition. I've done that with the goal of being able to use what I've got there and create a detail that I'm going to be able to reuse. So even though this was a smart view originally, I'm going to be converting it into a block that I can reuse over and over again. I'm going to go, first of all, back to my draw menu here, and I'm going to, first of all, add in some areas of hatch. I want to hatch in my stem wall, my footing, and my slab to indicate that they're concrete. To do that, there's a couple different tools that we can use, boundary hatch and polygon hatch. And I'm going to show you how to use both of them. First of all, I'm going to show you how to use polygon hatch. When I'm doing a polygon hatch, what I'm going to do is pick points to be able to define an area, like a boundary, where I want to be able to pour in this hatch. Think of it like pouring in paint. And the boundary that I'm going to be creating stops that paint from bleeding out and going into other areas. When I create that boundary line, it's telling me here that it can include that boundary line that I've drawn. So if I want to show that line, I can do so. I don't want it to show an extra line on my detail. There may be areas where you want that and you can take advantage of it. Next, it's also going to include a hatch pattern. And you can see right now that there's nothing selected. I haven't used this polygon hatch yet, so I need to select a pattern. So when I hit the select button, it takes me into my patterns dialog box where I have all different types of hatch patterns. For those of you that may have come from an AutoCAD background, any of the hatch patterns that you had in AutoCAD, if you're familiar how to reuse them here, we can load those in. All of our hatch patterns are PAT files. So we can share and use any kind of PAT file that you might find on the internet, and those are hatch pattern files. So I'm going to use one of these concrete options here. So we can see the concrete hatch pattern right there. I'm going to be using that in my stem wall area, and I click OK. So I'm telling it that I don't want a boundary line, I do want a hatch pattern, and I click OK. I'm going to draw your attention down to the lower left-hand corner of my Envisioneer screen. There it's telling me that's our prompt line, pick first insertion point. Where's the first point of this boundary line that I'm going to draw? I'm going to pick it as the end point of this line. Then I'm going to go to my next corner because it's asking me for my next point, and my next point, and my next point. I could keep continuing picking points. When I'm done, like I have been because I've picked those 4 corners, I simply right-click and tell it that I'm finished. And then inside that area, I have my hatch pattern. Let me repeat that one more time for you. So that's our polygon hatch tool. The polygon hatch dialog box opens up. I tell it I don't want a boundary line around it, but I do want to include a hatch pattern, and I want it to be the concrete option. So I click OK. And then I'm picking the points to define that boundary line. Left click at each corner, and I'm just using my slab as an option here. When I'm done, I right click, hit finish, and it fills it in with the concrete hatch pattern. If I zoom in close, you'll be able to see, hopefully over the internet, there's all little red dots and triangles in that area. If I select that hatch pattern after it's been inserted, it will allow you to do some different edits and things with it. You can see I've got it selected here, this hatch pattern option here. You can see over to the side under the object properties, it remembers that I didn't include the boundary, but I did include the pattern. You can switch that up and change it. You can change the style or the scale. If you find that it's too dense of a scale or it's too light, you can always come through and change it. So if I change that to a scale ×2, you can see it's gotten bigger. And then if I change that to a 0.5, you can see it's gotten denser. So you've got that option of being able to update those hatch patterns if you want to as well. Now in this footing area, I'm going to be using our boundary hatch tool. Our boundary hatch tool will look and see and find a boundary. So if I look at our footing as an example, it sees these 4 lines. And when it sees these lines, it sees those as a boundary. I couldn't use the boundary hatch tool for our stem wall or our concrete slab because there's no boundary at the top. So it would automatically start filling out the hatch pattern outside of that area. So I need to use the polygon hatch for this area, but I can use the boundary hatch for this area. So when I'm in the boundary hatch dialog box, in here, it allows me to define much the same information that I had in our polygon hatch tool. What type of style do I want to use? I'm going to go through and use, again, our concrete pattern. These patterns are the same. No matter if I use the boundary hatch or the polygon hatch tool, they're both looking at the same patterns. It's just a different way of putting them in. So this is the same concrete pattern. You can see it's got its scale of 1, and I can scale that up and down if I need to. And next it wants to know the boundary. How can I pick the boundary? So there's 2 different detections you can see here. One, it's going to look for the outer lines of the boundary. When it's doing that, if it detects an inner boundary as well, what do I want to do with the inner boundary? Think of using this on a wall elevation. And I've selected my boundary of the walls, but it detects windows. Do I want to hatch through the windows or hatch around the windows? So you can see outer or ignore. What I have to do, though, is select the boundaries, and that's what this little button is that I'm highlighted over right now. I choose Select Boundaries. It brings my cursor out into my model again, onto my drawing sheet, and I'm moving my cursor into these areas. And when I move my cursor around, you can see that it's detecting the different areas. It's detecting a boundary around these hatched areas because the boundary hatch, the polygon hatch, has an invisible line at those edges. But before using that tool, it wouldn't have seen them. Now when I move it into the footing area, you can see that you get that green dashed line. That's our boundary that it's going to form in this area. So I'm going to left click to accept it, and it becomes a solid green line. Now it wants to know, do I have any other areas that I want to hatch? I can pick another insertion point. If this is the only area that I want to use the boundary hatch tool in, I can right click and choose enter. It'll bring me back into that boundary hatch dialog box where it knows I have a selected boundary because it allows me here to remove it if I don't want it anymore. It knows my hatch pattern. It knows I'm going to include the boundary and the pattern. So if I don't want to include the boundary line, I can just use the pattern. And then I get a little preview, and it shows me what it's going to look like. If I like that preview, I can right-click and choose Finish. If I don't, I hit Cancel, and it takes me right back into that dialog box. I'm happy. I'll choose Finish. So now I've got more detail into this detail that I want to eventually save. I'm also going to add in some further details. So under the Draw tab, the very last tool that you see, the very last icon, is our additional details that I can put on here. So one of them is going to be rigid insulation, bad insulation, a wood section, a masonry section, a cut line, or a roof symbol. So I'm first going to use the rigid insulation option. I'm going to pick my first corner where I want it to go, left click. I pick my second point where I want it to end, left click. And then as I pull down, you can see that I can show how thick that rigid insulation is. So as I'm pulling down, in the command area at the bottom of my screen, I could actually type and say I want it to be 4 inches thick. Hit enter, and there it puts it in for me. The bad insulation tool would be the exact same. So if I choose the bad insulation tool, I'm going to pick the intersection of my slab and my stem wall as my start point. I'm going to pick the end point of my stem wall, and then I'm going to pull through and show how thick I want that to be. So you can see the different thicknesses that I'm going through. So if I want to be 6 inches thick there, hit enter, and I've got 6 inches of bad insulation up against that wall. Okay, so you can see all the information that you can put through. You can also add text and dimensions to this detail as well. So I'm going to go text, and I'm going to change the text style here to be a heading, and I'm going to type in capitals here that this is a footing detail. Okay, I'm going to select it, I'm going to underline it, click OK, and zoom out here so I can put footing detail under there. That's awfully big size of text that I've chosen there. I might select that again and change that height of that text there to be something a little bit different. I'm going to select that and maybe make that a little bit smaller. It's got a 3/8 of a height there. I'm going to change that to 1/8 and keep it as a black color. That looks a lot better. So there's my text underneath my footing detail. I could continue adding all text to describe all of the different components using our various details. When I think it's the best detail I've ever seen and I want to use it over and over again, it's just wonderful and it's going to help me out with all of my projects, I want to be able to save it so that I can share it over and over again. If I go up to the Insert pull-down menu and I choose Blocks, you'll see an option there to define a block. I'm going to choose that option. In the Define Block dialog box that appears, it wants me to give it a name. So I'm going to call it Footing Detail. And you'll notice I can't click OK yet. There's a couple of things I need to do before I can click OK. First of all, it needs to know what's in this block and where am I going to insert it from. So it needs a base point. It wants me to pick a point so that when I insert this detail again on a new sheet, is it going to be attached to the top of the detail, the bottom of the detail? Am I going to be attached to the text? It needs to know what part is going to attach it to my cursor when I go to insert it again. So I pick point. And I'm going to put and line up my cursor so that it's on the edge of the text. So that's going to be the point that I'm inserting it from. So I just picked that my insertion point here, my base point is right there, and that's my base point. And you can see when I did that, base point is now defined. But I still can't click OK. I need to select the objects that are going to be associated with this block. So I hit Select Objects. I'm moving my cursor up into this point in the upper right-hand corner away from my detail. I'm holding down my left mouse button, and as I hold down my left mouse button, I'm moving it to the other corner. I'm drawing a box around the entire detail, holding down the left mouse button. When I get everything that I want as part of this detail in that window that I'm drawing, I release my mouse button, and you can see everything turns green. Everything that's selected is green. When I have everything selected that I want part of this block, I right-click and hit Enter. It now tells me that I've selected 7 different objects. 7 different objects are going to be part of my footing detail, and the base point of the insertion is going to be around the footing detail text. Before I click OK, I should review this one portion here. When I create this block, it wants to know what to do with the original pieces. What do I do with those 7 objects that I've selected? Do I retain them as they originally were? Do I convert them to a block so they'll all be conformed together as one single element? Or do I delete them? Do I get rid of them? I'm going to tell it to just retain it as it was. Let it be this little detail that I've drawn on my screen. We don't need to further touch it. And I click OK. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to go back to the Insert pull-down menu. I'm going to choose Blocks, and I'm going to choose Insert Block. When I do that, an Insert Block dialog box pops up, and it shows me all of the blocks that I have created inside of this drawing file. So there I see the footing detail. And I click OK. A copy of the footing detail attaches itself to my cursor, and I insert it. So there's a copy of my footing detail. How else can I create this footing detail to share it maybe with other people and bring it into other files? This footing detail that I've created in that block format resides in this particular file only. It's part of the details.bld file. So if I'm in a new drawing project, I have to be able to obtain that footing detail. How can I grab it out? If I go back up to the Insert pull-down menu and go to Blocks, you'll see Insert Block from File. That allows you to open up other files that you've created, other .bld files, your Envisioneer files, and look for blocks that you've inserted into that file. So doing that, I would look for this details.bld file, and then I could find my footing detail from it. An alternative way to do that is I'm going to select all of these objects again. I'm going to go up here to the Edit pull-down menu, and I'm going to choose Copy. I'm then going to go to the paper where I haven't inserted anything at all yet, and I'm going to go back up to the Edit pull-down menu, and I'm going to choose Paste, and left-click on the screen to place that footing detail here. I'm going to erase anything else that's on this page. So I'm hitting delete now, and that title block is gone. The only thing on this number 2 worksheet view page is this footing detail. The reason I want it to be the only thing on this page is I'm going to go up to File, Export, and export a 2D drawing. When I do that, it's going to export everything that's on this sheet to the 2D drawing page. And when it does that, if I had the title block, it would also be included. I just want this footing detail. So before I choose Export 2D drawing, I want to make sure that it's the only thing on my screen. So I choose Export 2D drawing. I'll just put a copy of this out on my desktop, and I'll call it footing detail. And you'll notice that I can save it as a DWG or a DXF file. So I hit Save, and it says Export Successful. You just created a new block. That's a DWG file. And using our Insert pull-down menu, Import a CAD file tool, you could bring that back in on all of your future projects. So you could save them strategically somewhere out on your hard drive, all of these details that you've exported, and then just import them into your new projects by using the Import CAD file. I'm going to go over that tool in just a minute. Now, for those of you that maybe are familiar with using AutoCAD, want to be able to manipulate this somehow in AutoCAD as well, remember that when I use the Copy tool, that Copy tool will copy it to your general computer clipboard, and you can paste that into an AutoCAD file. So if you have AutoCAD open at the same time, you could even just hit Paste in AutoCAD, and it will paste it into AutoCAD for you too, so you can do more manipulations there as well. But let's take a look at importing CAD files. I'm going to open up another sheet of paper here so we can look at this tool. I'm going to choose Import a CAD file. It brings you into this open dialog box that as a default will go to this Drafting Objects folder on your hard drive. This is where we've saved details for you. You'll see that there's a Details folder. I'm going to double click on it. In here, there's many different details that we've created for you. And if you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll even see there's another folder that has subfolders of even more details that you can use. So I'm just going to open one up here. We'll open up the foundation with 2x6 with a brick veneer white, and I'll hit Open. So I'm opening up a DWG file. In the Import dialog box that appears, you'll get a preview of the detail that you're going to be bringing in. And at that point, you could also scale it at the same time. So I'm going to scale it up to be twice as big because it was originally drawn at a 1/2 inch scale, and I'm bringing it into a 1/4 inch environment. So I want to scale it up twice as big. I like what I see. I hit insert. A copy of it attaches to my cursor. I left click to insert it. And then I'm just going to zoom in on that detail that it brought in. Not happy with a couple things about this particular block. The name, the title of this detail is running over the lines. Either I need to stretch out that line or change the name of that text or the size. And there's a couple little details that I want to change. If I left click to select it, it's like any other view that I've inserted. Over to the right-hand side, I can look at its object properties. And you can see I can edit the definition of the block. It's not a smart view, so you won't get all of the other options. It's a block I've inserted. It recognizes that it's a block, and I can edit its definition. So I'm going to choose Edit. And just like when I was editing the little detail of the footing that I brought in, now I can click on any text that I want to change, any line work that I want to change, and I can update it. So I'm going to take this foundation wall at 2x6 framed, and I'm going to change its text. In the object properties that appear when I highlight that text, you can see it recognizes that it's text. Even though it's an AutoCAD file that we're bringing in, we recognize the lines and the text as individual elements, and we know what to do with them and can edit them. So I can look at the object properties, and I can see contents, and it looks like the text that's written there. So I hit on the little button beside it, and it brings up our text editor, where I can change this text. So I'm just going to change and truncate the word foundation so it fits. Foundation wall at 2x6 framed. Click OK, and it's updated. That's true for any line work as well, if I wanted to change anything associated to the line. So if I zoom in here, a little too tight there, if I zoom in on this area, I can change any of this lines as well. So if I wanted to maybe take out the flashing, if it wasn't part of the detail that I wanted to draw, I can remove that flashing out and remove the associated arrow and the text. And now it's the detail that I want. So any of the details that you see as part of our default details, you can bring them in, edit them, change them, and then hit escape so they become a detail again. Okay? And then the same thing could apply like I did with my own detail that I created. If this now represents a better version of this block, and you're going to use this copy more than the original because this has your customized details into it, I could go back out and export it out as a 2D drawing, put it back into that details folder and call it a different name, or I could save it as a block and bring it back and forth as a block. Okay, we've covered a lot of information today about details. So let me backtrack and cover everything for you, just a little synopsis of everything that we did before I get to your questions, because I see there's a number of questions already listed. I'm going to go back to our model space. In model space, we started off using the section tool. We created a new section through our model 2 different ways because we wanted to use that section cut as the basis for a detail that we're going to create. And when we picked that section, we were conscious of the fact that we picked 2 points to show our section line and how deep we were picking. It created the sections for us. We used those as the basis for some details that we created. So we first started off by inserting and defining smart views of our 2 sections. And when we inserted and defined those 2 smart views, we decided that we wanted to create a detail around this footing. So we went back up to that Define Smart View dialog box, and we remembered that what we see is exactly what we insert. So if we zoom in on a certain section of that, like the stairs here, that's going to be the only thing that I'm going to be inserting. Nothing else will come in. I can also take advantage of the view filter and make sure that I turn off the visibility of different things that I might not want to see. When I have the detail exactly as I want it, remember that it's the scale over here on the left-hand side that's going to affect how it's going to be inserted. No amount of zooming in and zooming out changes the scale. That just determines what I see and what I don't see. I changed it to a particular scale. I have exactly what I want to see, and I inserted it onto my drawing screen. Once it's inserted onto the drawing screen, it is itself a block. It knows that it's all attached together in its information. So when I select it, its object properties appear to the right. I can redefine the settings if I've inserted something that I didn't mean to. I can update the contents of it if something in my model changes. But in individual little details like this, what you're more apt to do is edit the definition of that block so that you can remove out any extra lines that you don't want to. So if I click on our new stair one and hit edit, I'm just going to get rid of the lines that it draws around that section view as it creates it. Once I'm done with that, I hit escape. So it attaches everything back together. And then I can take advantage of all the tools under the Draw tab. If I need to draw additional lines, circles, little rectangles, revision clouds, putting in hatch in two different ways we covered today, polygon hatch and boundary hatch. And we also looked at all the different detail tools, rigid insulation, bad insulation, putting those in. There's also a cut line tool that can cut off the top sections of your details as well. Once you have a fabulous block that you think you're going to use over and over again, there's a number of different ways that you can save it to share it for future projects. One, if you're just going to be creating it and inserting the block, that's per drawing. So I'm going to find all of the blocks and insert them that I defined within this drawing. If I want to insert a block that I created inside another drawing file, I can use the insert block from file. The alternative is to export it out as a 2D drawing. But just remember, everything that's part of that worksheet view, that current one that you're in, is going to be exported out as that 2D drawing file. So if you want to get rid of everything but that one detail, a quick way to do that is to copy that detail onto another sheet that may be blank. And then once it's there and copied over, that's when you can file and export it. When you want to insert it again, go back to the Insert pull-down menu and take advantage of our Import CAD File tool. We've included with the details under this Details folder that you can insert. And once they're inserted, they have the same object property edit options that you have for all of the different views that you insert. So you can manipulate the text, erase lines, add different data. And when you do that and have, again, another modified block that you really like, then you can save it as a new DWG file so that it can become your standard detail. Lots of information covered today. I hope it's going to help you create your own custom details that you're going to be able to use for your projects. What I'd like to do now is to focus in on your individual questions that you might have. So if you have a question about details and everything that I covered today, type them into the GoToMeeting console that's on the side of your screen. I'll be able to read those. No one else can see them, so no worries about it being embarrassed about asking a question. I'll be able to address those questions, and believe me, every question is a good question. If you're thinking about it, everybody else in today's webinar has probably got that same question. So help everybody out and ask as many questions as you can. I noticed that the Section A markers are large. Can they be reduced in size? So if I go back out to my model and look at the A1 markers here, the A1 marker signs here are a block. So when I'm creating those sections, and I'm just going to create a little fictitious one here, and it's creating those, it's looking out at the font style and everything that you're using. So if I had used maybe a smaller size here, not headings, but maybe dimensions, it's going to use that size for the text, and then I'm just going to put it back into 2D. It's an actual block, though, that's being created there, and that's that detailed block. So you'd have to update that block, and that's something that we control inside the software. So if you insert it out onto your drawing sheets, you can take advantage of the scale option. So if I go out to one of my drawing sheets, I'm going to select our block here and pretend this is one of those section markers. I can go up to the Modify pull-down menu and choose Scale, pick in the middle of it, and tell it that I want it half the size, and then it's going to be reduced. So if you want to as well change that to be smaller, you can take advantage of being able to scale that down. Okay, and let me go to our next question. I noticed CADSoft has a lot of details. I used a few in whole, but can I adjust or edit any of these details? Absolutely. Any of those details that are in that list, bring them in, modify them as you need to, and then if you export them and save them as the exact same name, it'll overwrite the existing drawing file so that you're using your new ones that you want to. So absolutely, bring in any of the details that you saw in that list, and you can edit any of them. Can the scale of a hatch pattern be increased or decreased? Yes. When we're looking at the scale factor of a hatch pattern, like, for example, the one in my footing detail here, I'm just going to zoom in so we can see this a little bit better. Seemed a little too far there. If I'm not happy with the scale of this hatch pattern, if I select the hatch pattern, you'll notice that I can change the scale over here to be half the size there, 0.5, and it's going to get denser for me. The hatch patterns themselves, if I go up to the draw pull-down menu here and go to our hatch and hit select and right-click on any of the patterns, I can choose edit the pattern, and it's here that I can also adjust the scale. So if I know that I'm always going to want that to be a denser pattern, instead of having the scale, the overall scale of 2000, I can play with that scale value to adjust it to a scale that I like better. So yes, any of those patterns can be manually scaled per drawing, just as I showed you by selecting it and just adjusting the scale here. Or if it's a universal scale you know you're always going to want to do, you can edit the pattern itself. Okay. When you inserted the insulation, did it insert at the detail scale 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch? It looks like out of proportion with the slab. When I inserted those pieces of insulation, it's looking at my overall scale of my drawing sheet. And the overall scale of my drawing sheet is a 1/4 inch equals a foot. So if I wanted to adjust that to be twice as big, because this is a 1/2 inch detail, instead of saying I wanted it 4 inches thick, I should have said 8 inches thick, and that would have made it bigger. But when you're working on the drawing sheet, and I'm not working inside the detail, I inserted that as a separate entity, it's looking at my overall scale in my drawing sheet, and that is a 1/4 inch equals a foot. Okay. Can I add dimensions to a detail under Draw or Tools? Yep. You have the same options. When we inserted the text to say footing detail, you can also go up to Tools and Dimensions and add in dimensions, linear dimensions, any kind of extra information that you want to help you really spell out this detail and make it as detailed as possible so that it's helpful for any other insertion. So add hatch to it, add additional lines to it, add in those details like the insulation like I did, or dimensions. Any of that extra information can be added. That seems to be all of our questions that are listed up there. If you have an additional question, please type them in now, and I'll be able to address them during the class. Otherwise, if there isn't any further questions in the next minute, we'll end off the webinar. And when we end off the webinar, what I'll do is I'll email you out a booklet about details so you can read about everything that we covered in today's class. We've also recorded today's class, so it will be available on our YouTube channel, and also on our archive that's on our website. If you're not familiar where the archive is on our website, I will take you there now to show you where that is. So if you go to www.cadsoft.com, you'll see this little hamburger menu up in the upper right-hand corner. I'm clicking on it and going to our Learning Center. If you've never been up to our Learning Center, it's a composition of many different things. One, there's support videos and written white sheets to help you. If you're brand new to Envisioneer, we have a section that pulls out those videos and those tutorials that are really good for new users, so you might want to review that section. Here under Community, this is where you can talk to other clients that use Envisioneer and ask questions. So when our office closes at 5 o'clock Eastern Time on a Friday night and you've got a project that's due the next day, go up to our community, post a question, and people around the world will be able to help you. But here under Events and Training, this is where we list all of our upcoming webinars, training classes, trade shows that we're going to be attending. And at the bottom of that schedule, so if you scroll down on this page, you'll see our upcoming schedule. So this is where you can register for all of these classes that we're doing, and these are our Tuesday classes. You'll also see this area right here called Webinar Archive. And the text underneath it, it says Access the Webinar Archive. And if I pick on it, it takes us into all of our past presentations where we've updated this page to show you a quick way to be able to view all of the videos. So if you wanted to watch the roofs class that we've done in the past, or foundations or bathroom design or working drawings or framing or catalog management, all these different classes have been recorded and they're up here for you to review. Let me just check for one further minute. There doesn't seem to be any further questions that are, oh, let me see, there might be. I can add notes with line arrow to detail. Yes, just like I added that note at the bottom of the detail that said footing detail, you can also add our notes with a leader, and that'll automatically draw the line as well. So yes, exact same tool, just use notes with a detail. So I want to thank everyone for joining me for today's class. I hope you learned a little bit about details and how you can use them in your working drawings, how to save them so you can use them in future projects, just to save yourself that extra time of having to redraw them over and over again. If you have any other questions, never hesitate to contact our support office. They're open Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 5 Eastern Time, and they'll be able to assist you as well. Thanks, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next week during our Tuesday class. Have a great day. Bye-bye.